Cool. Thank you guys for joining us Wednesday, February 14th. As you guys can see, today's topic is close to relative topic as we can get to Valentine's Day. Falling in love with your comparables with myself, Edward, and Kevin. Brought to you by the lovely multifamily freedom chasers community. All right. So we'll have a like I was kind of mentioning before we got started. This topic can go either very deep dive and open a can of worms, but today we're gonna keep it within the hour like we always do. Just go over what comparables are and all the different angles to it, and making sure you're kind of know what to look for. So it's very easy to uh, either go far off left or right, and verifying it, I think, is always a good thing. But we'll get more into that.
Yeah, it's this is a topic that I do care about a lot. I know Ed does as well. There's always a couple areas in underwriting that can kind of trip up a team if they're not diligent enough and thorough enough, and this is really one of those things. So we felt like we could kind of tie in the date today into the importance of this, and we're really excited to kind of go over some top notes on it, and then open the floor up, hear what other people might have to say, or what they're seeing out there right now, and we'll take things from there step by step. So my name is Kevin Kohler. I'm a broker based in South Florida. My team and we service the entire country with a specialty in multiple asset classes, whether that be multifamily, hospitality, self-storage, and flex industrial warehousing. We are really happy again to have you guys here, and looking forward to really digging in. So,
Okay, time out. I'm gonna be that guy. Can you talk about what you recently received?
what we recently received.
Yes, you're telling me on the phone.
Oh,
Let's call
okay.
it a win. We want people to share their wins, so I think it
It's
starts
true. Yeah,
share
it's
your.
good to share some wins here. So my team and Ed included, as a part of the team, we were receiving a conditional loan approval yesterday on a 120 townhouse acquisition in the Florida Panhandle. It's overall it's a $21 million project, $18 million acquisition with CapEx. We're really excited. It's been as a broker. I've seen some financing deals go a little bit squirrely. This one, we were working with the bank on a loan assumption since July. So I want you all to kind of absorb that note for a moment and understand that, when you have a seller that's asking you to close in 45 days or 60 days or something, you really need to know the flexibility of that seller, and their desire to see you close the deal. Because I think if we had a seller on this deal that was not on board with us from day one, it probably would have fallen apart. And it was nothing to our fault or detriment. It was simply the bank that worked with Freddie Mac that was really dragging stuff out. So that was one thing, and then I have another client that also got another loan approval today on some specialty products, some car washes, which are another great investment opportunity. So yeah, good week. How about you, Ed?
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, one thing I want to say to that, and we want to like not go crazy deep into it, but the immediate lesson from that one is having seen the back and behind the scenes from it is when people, not only the seller, because I agree the seller's timeline is important, but investors who may, whether it's a KP principal, 1031 is a big one, obviously, because they have the most to lose sometimes on the timeline. It's really important to say, hey, it should and hope we close X date, but realistically, as Kevin just alluded, the timeline is never known because you don't have control. No matter, I don't care who it is, whoever's doing it, whoever's trying to qualify for the loan. Bottom line is, it's at the bank's pace. Of course, you had the holidays in between, which probably doesn't help. Um, and it can really shake things up. So like quickly, unfortunately, and abruptly, like it can get messy. So to that point, like don't promise anyone anything that you don't have full control over. There's so many things already we don't have control in this industry. The last thing you want to do is guarantee something that you really can't do anything about, and there's no repercussions for. The bank's not going to say, "Oh, sorry, 1031 person, I'll cover the bill." That's never happening. Trust me.
Yep.
So just be aware of that. Like the timeline is important.
Yeah, that and the attorneys will always get paid whether you close or not. So,
Also true.
yeah, but
And inspection.
yeah. So all that earnest money and at risk money, it's called at risk money for a reason. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you go through in the transactional process, of commercial real estate investing. But yeah, that was I'm glad you kind of had me point that out, Ed, and yeah, we're looking forward to it. Our team has worked really diligently on that since I guess 8 months now. So
Yeah. So yeah, my win is tied to that a little bit. I promise this wasn't scripted, but um, last week had actually the night of the Wednesday call. Actually, it was the last Wednesday night. I had a meeting with a big investor who wants to work with us and do a lot of different projects, and they have a lot of capital backing them, which hopefully then alludes to us having a lot of capital backing us. Just makes doing our projects uh, a lot less stressful, obviously, but a lot more opportunity now. Opens doors to more opportunity. That's the way to put it. Um, and might be flying out to Florida this week or next. I don't know yet. Sooner than I actually thought, but that's never a bad thing. So we gave a little bit about our wins. As you can see on the screen here, Quadriga is the brokerage that I run and operate based out of Los Angeles. Um, yes, I live in lovely California, which is why I fly to Florida for this stuff because it just makes a lot more sense. Um, but yeah, this is my Instagram, email, website. If you guys are ever in California, in Los Angeles, let me know. If you aren't, I don't blame you, but we have great weather, so there's that. Um, and Kevin, if there's anything else to add, go for it.
no, I mean, again, we're here to help. The purpose of this podcast is always to provide information and to assist people as they're going through the journey of becoming a multifamily freedom chaser. And it's about that. It's how do you unshackle yourself from the W-2, and how do you find yourself in a place of being able to command your schedule, to command your life, and we enjoy kind of giving back towards that aim. So yeah, no, that's it. If you want to reach out to me, you can schedule directly into my calendar with the chatwithkevin.com. You can scan the QR code to download my contact card, and always happy to chat.
Sweet. And if anyone has wins, feel free to throw them in the chat. If you want to elaborate on them and talk more about them, raise your hand. We could go from there. Um, just the Freedom Chasers, the multifamily Freedom Chasers vision. If you guys have been on our calls, you've seen it, you've heard it. I'm not going to read it again, but it's here for you guys to check out. And here's the team, all the lovely leaders, depending on the day of the week, or what week it is. Monday, Wednesdays are our calls. You'll see one, two, or three of us sometimes on these calls. So please check in, and we have them on YouTube as well. So if you don't get a chance to or want to rewatch them, we've had some awesome guests in the past on the activation Zoom. I actually have a lot of videos on the YouTube page, a lot more than I realized actually once I was going through it. So yeah, check us out Mondays, Wednesdays. Uh, our team's really well diverse in that sense, so you're gonna get a lot out of it. I promise that much, and looking forward to seeing you guys on all the calls. And then, last but not least, on that side of things, YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Spotify. If you guys aren't connected anywhere here, please let us know. We'll drop the links throughout the Zoom today, and feel free to jump in, introduce yourself to the WhatsApp group, message us on Instagram or Facebook, and we always love connecting with you guys. Oh, here's a WhatsApp group. There you go.
Scan the QR code, join the group, contribute, learn, collaborate, find other people that are like-minded. It's a great place to just kind of mastermind with each other.
All right, so a little going into the topic, fall in love with comparables. Um, what really makes this one, the comparables component, important, and why we can kind of make this a lot longer conversation if we had the time for it, is being aware that the rental comparables and sales comparables are very important, but it gets really tricky sometimes in navigating them, making sure the accuracy of them. And as you get to bigger properties, or they're more privately managed, or you're in areas that don't have as many, it becomes a lot harder to do, and it's something you don't want to get. And I think that's a huge part. Kevin, if you want to jump in real quick, like in regards to the comparables, like what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think rental comparables, sales comparables, just a general word?
Yeah, so the reason I brought this slide together like this is when people think of comparable, they attach a lot of different meanings to it. As you're learning how to do a better job of focusing in on a real comparable, it starts out as like, well, if it's another multifamily property, like, right, like that's the same type of thing. And you're really like, if we look at this, it's something that's similar. It's, equivalent in quality, worthy of comparison. These are, I put this here to really highlight the fact that when you're underwriting, if you're a part of an acquisitions team, the actual identification of the comparables is just as important as running the financials through the T12s and the profit and loss and rent roll and all these other financial statements, because you don't want to compare a 1965 10 unit to a 2010 100 unit. Like that is a very obvious in many people's eyes, reason why you wouldn't want to compare, but you really got to dial in. And so that's a lot of that is why we go over, like, if you could on the next slide. We're going to be talking, really, like, these are the top 10 metrics to identify the comp set. Okay, so a comp set is that group of properties you're going to be basing your review on as the comparables. And these are really, these 10 items, they're the top 10 that popped out to us as we were kind of brainstorming on everything to discuss with you guys tonight. And I'll just go over it all, fairly quickly here for you. Naturally, you got unit count. You want to stay within a certain range of the subject property, of the property you're considering. If you're in a bigger market, with a higher population, a lot more buildings, you want to try and get it close, just a few percentage points in difference. So if you're looking at a 100-unit property, try and stay between like 80 and 120. Like you really want to try and keep it as narrow as you can without losing information. And the same thing goes with vintage. As a broker, what we see a lot when investors and their groups are reaching out to us, everybody has the same criteria. All right, like, and that's just based on the ease of taking over something like that, if you can get it priced right. And that comes down to the vintage, where if you want to consider how construction materials and building methods have changed over time. At the very end of the 70s, you have lead paint, stopping getting used. In the middle of the 70s, you've got plumbing going much more into PVC, not cast iron, not galvanized, and the other materials of pipe that are not conducive to easy asset management, I think is the best way to put it. You know, the things that are easier to fail or could be costly and hidden as you're reviewing initially. And then in Florida and some other markets, especially more, I would say, storm-prone markets, Gulf states, the vintage comes into more clarity when, like right now, we just on our 120 unit, I put it out to bid on multiple insurance companies, and one of them that I've used a bunch came through solidly, and then another one, they came back and said, you know what, you should go with that first guy because everybody we're talking to, they're tightening the belt and they don't really want to insure a property that's older than 1989. And so that's kind of why the vintage thing comes more and more. So usually what we hear from people is, mid 80s or newer, preferably 90s or newer. It seems, people like to find those things that are really less than 30 years old, roughly. Now, when you go to unit mix, we're talking about how many studios, how many 1 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. You don't want to compare a property that's all studios to a property that's all 2 bedrooms. So just keep aware of kind of the percentage of units in each type in comparison to your subject property. And then, of course, the proximity, because in real estate, there's some things that can never be changed, and that's the location. As we like to say, there's the three things you want to care about is location, price, and condition. And you can change the price and the condition. You can never change the location. So always check and see, how the neighboring properties are doing, if there's a neighboring property. And if not, then, how many miles away is it? Because that might show you a sign for opportunity. The occupancy rates, it's always good to get in my opinion, 2-year history. What do you think, Ed?
Yeah, it gets tricky if you've had like environment recently where it's either recently very modeled where they did a heavy capex and a lot of vacancies. So that's why you want to make sure you've overlooked any portion of that specific rehab, or if it's brand new construction, obviously then it was vacant the day they finished and everything prior. So especially when you're playing with those averages, you want to look out for any factors and any discrepancies you see that can be like, oh, hey, what happened this month? Like, why is it all of a sudden dropped 10%? And then it picks up a little after. So the average is great. And then that's where I guess the T12 plays more into part. But generally speaking, with the occupancy, you always want to be careful of like situational stuff, right? If it's and that's also, again, like we always go back to
Yeah.
knowing your market and knowing your like where you're investing and what really, like, there's some small cities that are supported by one or two things. If something happens, you want to know that. And I love the property management angle of this because they, especially those large buildings, if that's what you're looking at, they're gonna see like they know what the interest is like. They know how many people are lined up out the door looking to take a peek. They see the online activity even, which I think is I've actually never heard mentioned before, and I just thought of. So I was like, wait, that's a thought. Like online activity is as important nowadays because not many people want to go see the property. They're just like online photos, cool. Let's get in, let's get out, let's move on our lives. So as much information you can get on that end will help with that. And another thing regarding the location change too. For example, we're looking on Florida, obviously, like we've said that a lot. No, like you want to know why insurance is XYZ in one area and across the street it's not, I've made this comparison a lot. If I tell you, hey, pick one street where if I cross over, rents change, you're gonna have a street in mind in your city. Every city has that, no matter where you live. So keep that in mind too with the location component of it, because that one street may make the difference. And if you're running comps in an area that you're not very familiar with and you don't know that one street, that's a bad surprise after the
Yeah.
fact.
Yeah. And we put amenities on here simply because it's important to know what a property has in terms of what you might want to bring to the property. and yet you could use a property in your comp set that might have a playground for the kids while yours doesn't, as long as yours has the land to put one in. But if you don't have the ability to create that match after acquisition, then don't plan on using that comp, that property as a comp, because it'll skew your intended market rents that you want to take the property to.
And to
Uh,
take that a step further, real quick though, like sorry to jump in, but washer dryer, huge.
oh yeah,
Parking spaces, big. Does it come with like is there storage space? Sometimes people have the luxury of being able to offer that. What utilities may or may not be included in the rent. This is why, and we'll get to later in the slides, like pretend you want to rent the place and give them a call. Hey, what's included in this? If they say it's 300 more, I'm throwing a random number out there, but XYZ is included and all of a sudden it's justified, you can't use that as a rental comp for your unit because you're not offering the same thing. You're offering the unit. Now, if you intend to offer XYZ with it and you want to match their price, great. But if you don't have space for washer dryer or that unit doesn't have it, now you've already lost. Like you're just not gonna match that. If I have two units, one offers washer dryer, one doesn't, and I have to figure it out, guess which one I'm picking?
that's right. Yeah, I mean that
That's
washer
huge
dryer.
too.
Yeah, I mean that's a great example, because I mean that's right there. It's an easy $50 rent bump just by having it in the unit. And I know right now a lot of people, when they're looking to maximize revenue options, they look at, oh, we'll just put in like a rental program or something. And at the end of the day, it's going to be less hassle for you, your staff, and everybody else, just to put them in the unit and just increase the rent $50 automatically, and then you have that, and that's a part of how to do it. So that kind of goes right into number 7 on rents. When you're looking at the rents, this is what you want to make sure your comps are going to be showing you, and that's why you want to be as specific as possible. Because again, when you identify all these other criterias and you see whatever rents those properties are getting and achieving, then you're going to have a better idea of what your story is going to be on your acquisition and where that's going to go, without overstating or overhyping the potential. And of course, that's a huge red flag for anybody else when they're doing their due diligence to potentially invest with you. The last 3 items are all demographic related. They're all pretty important. Everybody kind of ends up with their own criteria that they're going to use to identify properties. But if you're looking at, say, a large city, you want to still kind of look at the 1 mile population, the 5 mile, 3 mile population. Same with the average incomes of the household and the growth rates. So if you're always just going to the census numbers, for example, you're not going to really get a complete picture. It's the same thing as determining a value of a house on Zillow. You're just not going to, you might have some kind of an idea, but you really don't. Best way for me to put it. So you gotta start to look at multiple sources, look for other studies that have been put out, maybe other companies that have their own kind of financial interest in getting the information out to you. They'll be publishing, the top 10, growing cities in Texas, or these other items. And that's where you want to start to determine, okay, looking at all these other sources, how strong is the market growing? A lot of the properties I've looked at in the past several months, if it's a smaller MSA, a smaller city, you're actually seeing population declines, and it's almost negligible when you look at census numbers. But when you look at really how everybody's migrating, you might think differently. And so that's why, multiple sources when it comes to demographics, to me, is a big assist to winning.
To add to that, with the demographic and everything that Kevin was just saying, it again goes back to sometimes you get either a smaller city or even a city that has one anchor, it's kind of called. Um, you gotta know the ins and outs of them. like those type of companies, or even whatever it is, military, Air Force companies sometimes, and their average income has a large factor and holds a lot of weight in that community. So are they hiring more people? What is the recent news on them? Are they moving? What happens if the company that employs, let's say, 30% of your population all of a sudden gets up and leaves town? That's a lot of income that's walking away with it. It changes the lifestyle, right? What happens if an Amazon or a Tesla, Apple, whatever company you want to XYZ is moving into a town? That's another large factor, right? It could go both ways, obviously. But when it happens and it goes well, you're happy about it and you're like cherry on top. When it goes opposite direction, you're like, why was I not prepared for this? And that's a different story. So keep that in mind. Like, we are always going to advise on the area of like, be cautious, like know where you're looking at properties, know what the risk can be. Funny enough, Jerry, and I think he's on a call, but he just got on. Lenders look for that too. What direction are you trending? Like, are you being ridiculously optimistic? Like, this isn't underwriting just for you guys to also comparables aren't just for you, because obviously it's going to help you a lot. But a lender's going to look and like, hey, where'd you get these from? Like, Kevin knows he's been talking to banks and talking like doing kind of spearheading that the Florida one he was talking about. Like, you have these conversations and you have to have an answer. If you say I don't know, they're just gonna be like, great. Imagine how much longer that's gonna take.
Yeah. And what I would say too is as we kind of talked about in the previous sessions, the broker relationships that you can create, this is another way to really get an edge with, but how some people have to deal with this. And for example, I have clients that every now and then, I might have somebody call me and say, hey, Kevin, I'm looking at this property. It's off market. It's in Fort Worth, and could you do me the favor and send me like some CoStar reports, right? So use your commercial broker connections, and as you generate rapport with them, you might actually be able to get a lot of data out of them, and because they want to see you succeeding, because again, like I might not be helping them with that deal in Fort Worth, but I sure know that while they're looking for more stuff, they're going to always want to keep that ear open for anything I might have, or maybe, who knows, they might end up bringing me an opportunity in the future that they didn't have the liquidity for, or whatever. So, it's one of those one hand washes the other type things. And at the end of the day, for a broker that actually pays and uses the tool, pays for and uses those tools, it doesn't take long for me to get the report for you. I could probably, do it in 5 or 6 minutes. So it's just a matter of you letting us know that you need it. And then when you get it, I mean, a full underwriting CoStar report is going to be over 100 pages. It's a lot of data, and that's on one property. So it's also something that I would say, use that again with a grain of salt. The data is a little bit aged based upon how they collect everything. It's somewhere between 6 and 12 months aged in terms of the statistics. And so it's just, again, it's a guiding force. It's not the final say. And that's what our job is as underwriters, is to beat up the information and determine what the safest final say is.
And to the point again of discussing with the broker and reaching out, a lot of times some people, again, starting out, like we've all been there, or some people are there now even, it's like, if you don't know what to talk to a broker, or if you're like, how do I build a relationship with a broker, and without basically controlling, like that, scared of what they can ask or what direction the conversation can go, a big way with that is like, call a broker. Maybe it's someone for this property, or maybe you're just browsing the area, or hey, I want to see what the rents are like, and have that conversation. Like, hey, I did this homework. This is what I found. These are the differences. Did I miss anything, or is there any other comps I can add to my list, essentially, that you may have or you've rented out yourself, whatever the case is. You're just trying to have a conversation at that point, but it's like, hey, I'm doing some homework. I'm not just saying, hey, can I have something? Like, I tried. If there's anything missing, help me out. and they're like, okay, like this person is going out of their way a little bit, or whatever the case is. And um, also it's like you don't want them to just be like, oh, I have to start from scratch. It's, oh, I just know this one property, and like, or that looks good, and they verify it. That's, I don't think it's ever a bad conversation to have with a broker, because you're essentially kind of like pinpointing one topic that you want to talk about, and then you're just getting some help with that. And it could be a quick email, a quick phone call, whatever it is. It's just another way to get some reps and, I guess, screen time or talk time with a broker.
Yep. So, the grunt work. Okay. So, underwriting can sometimes feel like it's a underappreciated part of the process, because in the beginning we do the most work, but then that does kind of get spread out to everybody else as you go through the acquisition. So you got to get over that limiting belief. But the fact is, it's some of the most important work for any operational deal. And so when I was talking about the grunt work, we're really talking about that going outside the box, the going above, which really, this stuff to me is not going too far above what you should be doing. It's really a necessity to make sure you're doing it right. But call the neighboring properties, call the subject property. However, big caveat, don't disclose the true reason why you're calling. And most owners don't tell the property managers that the place is for sale. They don't want to scare them. They don't want them to start looking for a new job because they think they're going to get fired by a new buyer, by a new owner. You gotta be respectful of that operation as you're learning about it. I'm very used to scheduling a tour, and the listing broker will remind me, hey, don't wear that branded polo you're always wearing at the networking event or whatever. Like, remember, you're the insurance inspector, or like, some undercover reason why we're there. Because they don't want to scare the tenants. They don't want to scare the management. They don't want people to know the owner's business until it's appropriate for them to know. I have a deal last year that did fall apart, where we had one of the partners on the deal happened to live nearby. We were scheduling a tour. It did not get confirmed for the time we were shooting for. We let him know that it was not confirmed. He showed up with a general contractor, started knocking on doors, knocked on the management office. Manager freaked out because they didn't know the building was for sale. And I got a lovely phone call from the seller saying that if that partner ever stepped foot on the property again, they'd call the police. So, that deal didn't go anywhere. So, just be aware, be cognizant and be respectful. And then again, the third line, be a potential tenant. Like Ed had mentioned, when you're calling, hey, I'm looking to rent a 1 bedroom in the area, can you tell me more about your property? Or, hey, I'm going to I need to rent a 2 bedroom, for my family and and just trying to learn more about this. I found it on apartments.com, or, wherever you did see it. And let them talk, less is more. Let the management company talk to you more about what it is. Take notes on those additional fees, whether, all the way down to an application fee, and any monthly recurring fees that might show up on a lease, whether it be bill backs of utilities. Maybe you have a cable package with the community where you get to kind of upcharge a profit of 10 or 15 bucks a month, by providing the group cable rate, the group cable rate to yourself and the retail rate to your tenants.
And qualification.
Yes, and how they, yeah, thank you, and how they qualify tenants for taking the tenancy, because you might find a property that they look a little bit, but maybe they only want a 1 month security deposit, not a first last security, and some other things that maybe you would be nervous about, and you got to sit and think, okay, if I'm going to change the model of accepting tenants to be more strict, how will that affect my occupancy? Will it drag it out for a month or two and then restabilize, or is it in an area that maybe there's more dependency on subsidized rents and Section 8, and then you have to kind of understand with that the bureaucratic process in that county or city on how the housing agency hands out the vouchers. I mean, in South Florida, it could take a good 30 days, and that's after the tenant signs a lease, before they're approved to move in. So if you don't account for that, I mean, that's, 7% vacancy right there if you have a Section 8 unit that turns every year. So be aware. And then kind of going down again, the CoStar reports, like I mentioned about, reach out to your broker contacts. When you get a good relationship going with a broker, go ahead and ask them. Be like, hey, do you have CoStar? Oh, yeah, I've got CoStar. Okay. Does your CoStar just do the state of Ohio, or do you have a nationwide subscription, or a couple states subscription? Because for us brokers, it's a different price for each kind of tier. So it's a good thing to ask them. And then, hey, that's great to hear you have a nationwide subscription to CoStar. If I ever have an opportunity to look at something, like, would you possibly help me by maybe running a report for me every now and then, and I'll keep an eye out for you as well. Oh yeah, sure, that sounds great. And again, boom, more rapport, better relationship to get deals sent to you before it gets sent to somebody else. The crime reports, I didn't put this with the demographics, but it is a smart thing to kind of look around a little bit. You don't initially need to get super granular on this, but I do have a client right now that's buying something for themselves, and we just had the bank actually email us and say, hey, we found a news article that there was somebody got arrested on this street like 3-4 years ago for a shooting. Like, do you know anything about it? And I was like, oh, this is great. No, we didn't. Like, we looked, there's no disclosures from the seller on this, because the seller bought it like 3 months after that happened, and they bought it cash. So there's no bank that ever did the research. They just blindly bought it. And when we were looking, we looked a little bit, but my buyer was kind of, we have some clients where we do more of the lift for them, and this buyer wanted to do the lift on their own. So when that came in, what did I do? I immediately went to the county website to look at the crime records, the court documents, the public records. I pulled up the court case and I read everything. I read the police reports, I read the arrest affidavits, and I read, how he pled out, got rid of most of the big charges, and all these things. So then what do? We send all that to the bank. Hey, look, this was taken care of. It's not as bad as the newspaper article tried to make it out to be.
Okay.
And better news, that was before the current seller. And since then, the leasing standards have been increased dramatically, and yada yada yada. So that's a very important thing, to be able to control that narrative as quickly as possible. And you definitely don't want to have, say, a potential, I don't know, $1 million investor find it first and then ask you in a Zoom meeting or a conference call, like, hey, what about this grand theft auto charge, and like on the house, or on the unit? So it's just important for yourself. And again, the article searching helps to verify all this, and multiple sources. You want to look through the local newspapers. You want to look through in bigger cities, maybe the Real Deal might have something, or other publications that focus on the Texas real estate market and investors, or any little thing like that, to give you any inch of advantage over what the seller thinks.
Well, I want to give a credit and shout out to Jennifer. So I thank you for your chat comment a couple minutes ago because I actually made that mistake. Funny enough, so this is early on. So this is more young in the game, Edward. And I was talking to someone about this property. It's 960 some odd units. And they're like, "Did you ever Google the property?" Like, yeah, why? Like, did you read the reviews? I'm like, no, why? They're like, go for it. I was like, okay. I read, I was like, oh my God, this is a horror story. Like, it was brutal. Like, everything from like, I hear gunshots outside to they're not fixing the leaking roof, and I feel like the roof is gonna collapse, and like tenants complaining, and I'm like, this all happened in like the last like 6 months. I'm like, what the heck is going on here? I was like, okay, guys, just like forget it. What are we doing here? Like, why did we waste all this time? Um, mind you, this was also kind of happy we still went through with it because I got the practice of who hasn't made broker calls or like spoken to investors or like capital people. Um, I recommend doing it and trying to like pitch a deal and get punched in the stomach, and that's just me saying it nicely because it's the best way to learn. Like I got punched hard when I tried talking that property with people who know
Figuratively.
more about the. Yeah, luckily they were too far to physically punch me. Um, They had already seen the property. I didn't know that. The some questions I really didn't consider because I was kind of like new to this. They asked, of course. Um, Even worse when they asked and know the answer. That sucks. Um, so yeah, do more. It's better to be over prepared, especially because at the end of the day, when you are talking to an investor, um, the best response an investor or anybody, even if you're it's a partner you're looking to pitch or bring onto the deal, or you're even just explaining it to on this call, for example, let's say in the next call or the end of this one, even better. The best response anyone can give you is, "Oh, I was gonna ask that. Thanks for answering it." It's like
Yeah.
I've been through this before. Like with that Florida deal, the meeting last week. So many times I was like, "Oh, I was gonna ask that. All right, cool. Like, let's just carry on now." Like, "Oh, thanks for mentioning this." Like, I was thinking, okay, cool. Let's just carry. Like, you become second nature at this point. Um, and that's I think really big in regards to like doing your homework because so much of it is not only the numbers and maybe not even the city, it's the actual property. Like it's a small city sometimes if you think about it, like depending how many units it is. Shoot, the 120 Florida one kind of feels like a small city at times when you think about it. But um yeah, people are gonna ask about that. And the worst thing you want is pitching into an investor and they find out. Oh boy, that's a
Yeah,
fun
and
one.
in fact, I'm kind of glad you mentioned that. So I'll use our Panhandle, our Niceville property as a good example of that. When we first put it under contract, we put some feelers out there, and a lot of the initial feedback was like, "Why are you buying over there? Like that's not that like that's a tertiary market." And we were like, "Oh, okay." And we immediately would know that that was just somebody who was yet to be educated on the truth of that market. So when you dig into your comps, you get to really understand things. And like on that deal, what we identified as a hidden opportunity is the fact that the government owns half the land in the county. The fact that there are only three or four like old money families that own a majority of the undeveloped land that's privately held. The fact that because of these facts, there's a housing shortage in an area that when you look at a demographic within a 5 mile radius, you would think it's just a sleepy town. Yet there's people that commute 45 minutes each way to work in that sleepy town. So when you keep peeling back the layers of the onion, you get to find opportunities that other people ignore. And that's always where we're going to find, the things that are going to move forward. So, 2023, again, everybody kept saying like, why are you buying deals this year? You should be waiting. And we kept saying, look, like there's still people that need to sell, like people that want to sell. the deals are out there. They're just a little bit more hidden because there's a lot more junk to sort through. I mean, I'm part of another team that, geez, our group, it's about 15 different kind of GPs that go out there, and we send stuff out. And I mean, in our chats, we're talking about multiple LOIs, per day, per person, sometimes trying to go out, because it's a numbers game. I mean, you got to keep going out there and you got to keep underwriting these properties. But again, some of the metrics when you're doing an underwrite are really going to affect the end result, and that's going to be the comparables you're using. It's going to be the cap rate you're saying you're going to exit at. It's going to be it's going to be how your loan is structured, and it's going to be how your waterfalls are structured. Like there's a couple things there that if you trip up, you think you have a good deal and you just got a steaming pile of trouble. And so I know like how Ed and I, how well we work together. It's because we have like a multiple layers of accountability method where, I mean, on this deal, we had 5 independent groups underwrite it. And then we met in a Zoom with everybody's own underwrites, and we reviewed what the differences were. And we asked each other, like, how did you get that? How did I get this? And we figured everything out to say, okay, now if we coalesce all this information, we have a very risk mitigated, strong opportunity, and let's keep pursuing. And that, for me, my team, and Ed, I mean, being a part of it, we're in alignment on this. We opted for a, no hype, no frills approach, underwrite it conservatively, especially in a time where the capital markets are uncertain. And that way, okay, it might not be a grand slam, but it's a double or triple in a time when nobody says they can find a base hit. So you got to find your opportunities where they are. And I'll never understand the waiting game, because in real estate, the best time to buy is always now. So
to add to that real quick too, it's in a time where a lot of people aren't getting deals sent to their desks and they have capital waiting to deploy. Um, Now they may hit, like, your opportunity could be that one that's like, all right, this checks all the boxes. Not only that though, they always say it's a lot easier to raise on your second deal than your first, because your first closes and then people see that you can actually do this. So that's a little bit of fire. It kind of like catapults you. Like, it's same thing with doing this is something as simple as a flip, right? Once you do that first flip, that limiting belief, any doubt, the growing pains, the training wheels come off, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's it? Oh, I can do 4 or 5 of these a year. And then all of a sudden, obviously in the flipping game, it's a lot scales to a lot higher numbers. But you get my point. Like, okay, 120, great. Now by the end of the year, let's shoot for 600. Let's shoot for 500. Let's
yeah.
shoot for 1,000. Who knows, right? You kind of take the top off of that. And another thing regarding kind of what Kevin was saying about the market, um, don't look at a zip code or a city's population consensus on Google. That's not really going to give you the information you need. Because if you Google a city and it tells you there's like it's an X population, like a couple of thousand, let's say, you're like, oh, that's too small. Then you realize, yeah, the city's small, but then you do a 10-mile radius, all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is a very populated area. There's just separate city limits or whatever the case is. Or especially those cities with large lots. Like, yeah, it's not going to have a high population because everyone owns an acre. Like, what do you expect? Doesn't mean there's not going to be a lot of people within the neighborhood or vicinity of like an X mile radius, or the income isn't there, or XYZ. Like that old commercial, just because it's on the internet, don't believe it. Is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I mean, says the broker from LA, but yes, it is accurate, because even say I'll use my backyard in Fort Lauderdale. When you've got municipalities within the metroplex, and they Google what's the population of, I don't know, Hollywood, Florida, or Dania Beach, Florida. I'll pick a smaller town. you're going to see that number on Wikipedia of whatever the census said, but it's not going to tell you the actual population of the MSA or within that multi-mile radius, because all of a sudden you've got downtown Fort Lauderdale, you got Hollywood, you got Davie and all these other towns like around this one example I'm giving you, and so you're gonna barely. I mean, it's misleading data. When you take incomplete or quick fix information, it's gonna mislead you away from the truth versus provide clarity for you and your team to make a safe decision. And again, that's the whole point of underwriting, verifying what the sellers are telling us and coming up with our own value to see if there is an opportunity for both sides to agree and move forward into a contract. And again, without falling in love with the process of reviewing your comparables, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have a very difficult time having a deal make sense to you. Or I should actually say the opposite. You're going to find ways to make that deal look great, and it might not be. So clarity is power. But I know this hour is kind of already breezed by, so I want to open the floor up real quick for anybody. If anybody has any questions, comments, Georgina.
Hi. So my name is Georgina,
Hello.
and I'm located in Northern California. Our weather is raining right now. So
It's okay, California. I'll take what I can get.
it's nice to meet you. This is my first time here. I found you on Facebook.
Awesome.
I do have a question about the underwriting. So, and you're a broker?
Yes, we're both
Kevin?
brokers.
We're
Okay.
both, yeah.
Okay. So, I'm underwriting a deal over in Oklahoma, and it is in a tertiary market. The owners, they're in their 80s, and this is their last piece of property that they're trying to sell because they're getting out of the.
They're retiring.
Yeah, they're retiring, so they're getting out of the game. So this property it was 1970s. And I know everybody says stay away, like avoid the 1970s, and you were mentioning that. I'm still going to do the underwriting. We've walked the property, we've met the broker, and we just feel like it's been mismanaged. It's very under rent, and that there's potential. There's a lot that can be added. The value add is there. They're asking like 3 million. It's 60 units. I was doing comparables, and I got the CoStar report, and the most recent property that was sold in that area was in 2022, and it was built in 2006. And I want to say, I think it had I don't remember the number of units it had, but it was kind of comparable. And they only it sold at 41, almost 42,000 a unit. And so I'm trying to do this underwriting, and for what they're asking, that's a lot higher, especially for the age difference. The 2006 that sold, because it was a 2006 complex, so it's a lot newer, and it sold for a lot less per unit than what they're asking. So when I'm doing my underwriting at what they're asking, the numbers are really bad. Like it's not good. So my question is, do I underwrite then at a lower value, what I feel like would be a more reasonable amount, where it would be beneficial then for our investors? And I just like,
Yeah.
how do I approach that with the broker? Because I don't want to burn the relationship with the broker. And I know he wants to close the deal. And this has been on the market for like 16, 17 months.
Okay. So right there, you got several flags, right? So you have an aged property. That means everybody's already looked at it.
Yeah.
So it's either the broker is misleading the sellers, or the sellers won't let the broker adjust the price. And then your underwriting, you're always going to underwrite it at the pro forma of the broker to just kind of understand the baseline. But then the next step is always bringing it back until you find a formula that would make sense for your investors. You got to get it down to that number that fits your criteria to acquire it. Once you get it there, maybe it's $1 million difference. You got to let the broker know, hey, you're at 3, I'm at 2. And I got to understand what is holding the property at this value. And if they don't have an answer, then it's all bluster. They're just trying to market and hope that somebody's going to bite. If they try and come back with a narrative of this is why it's worth whatever, you already have more ammunition to say, well, wait a minute, broker, we see this 6 or 7 property.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, and it's at the $40,000 per door. And how is this worth more than a much newer property? And again, if they don't have an answer ready, that's a good sign that they really don't have an answer, that they're just trying to get what they can get.
Okay.
But yeah, like to me, I in South Florida, I'm surrounded by majority properties from the 60s and 70s. I feel most of the time, but I've had clients buy stuff from the 30s. I've lived in properties. I mean, my dad was in the military, I lived in a property that was like Buffalo Soldier stables in Kansas, like from the 1800s. So I've lived in properties that are super duper old, but it was well maintained, so you didn't have to worry. Because again, military housing, like they Uncle Sam has the money to maintain the building, but it's that building that maybe has the cast iron pipes that they've been ignoring and patching, and then all of a sudden you buy it, and if it's a multi-story building, what if the vertical pipes, the vertical stack pops, and then you're going to have to rip out walls and bathrooms and stuff just to get to the pipe, and then replace the pipe, and then patch everything and replace those bathrooms. And so it's the hidden costs that then make you have to increase your reserves, your potential CapEx budget, which then skews your numbers further. So yeah, it's that peeling back of the onion, and the exercise of the underwrite. Even if you think that you might not be proceeding with it, you've already started, you already visited the property, you've done a lot of legwork. Do it for the practice at the very least, and follow through as your heart is telling you to. Because again, like as a broker, I wear 2 hats. Like the fiduciary impact is very important to me as an investor and as a broker. So I have to look out for my people. Like if I'm going to be telling people I know to invest in this property, I really need to have these answers, not just for myself, but for them and their sake, and the sake of their legacies and families and what they're doing this for. So, I wouldn't hesitate in taking people to bat. And yes, the relationship is one thing, but if this is the first property that they've been looking at with you and stuff, I would also say, like, do you really have a relationship yet? Like relationships are earned through getting the transactions done, or maybe like I've gotten good relationships with people where the brokers and I, we've done LOIs back and forth, but we couldn't really get things to work out. But due to the openness of our conversation in the process, they then sometimes refer people to me as saying like, hey, this guy's just looking to invest in properties. They can't really buy it on their own. So don't worry too much about the burn rather than the protection of your people.
Okay.
To add to that too, I don't think you're gonna say anything that he hasn't heard the last 17 months.
Yeah.
Like, and another thing, like real quick on my angle, one thing that I'm kind of a big component of, and this is where, it is very scenario specific, because it can obviously case by case, but if it's been on the market that long, you haven't seen a price adjustment, you haven't seen numbers improve, you haven't seen the property improve, and the rates haven't cut it into thirds like they did at one point. What has changed since original list? Nothing. Okay, so what makes me think I'm gonna see something different than the last 17 months that people may have seen? And then to Kevin's point earlier, I'm not gonna go down this rabbit hole. I'm just gonna show you the calculator that we use a lot. The SDA one, I like it for this reason because you have the scenarios. Marketing package, what they're showing you. My version, like kind of are what we plug in. Even you can see the prices are different. And then projected, it would be like, okay, best case scenario maybe, or forward looking, right? So if this is the calculator you're using, it's a real easy way to kind of jump through the scenarios. And having it in front of you like this will be like, okay, these are the differences, and this is where I differ from them. So when you are having that conversation, you're not going off of memory, you're not all over the place, you're organized in one spot, right next to each other. Hey, you said this, but I found this. So how did you get to your number? Kind of like Kevin was saying earlier, like we don't all have to like fight for every single line item, but understanding where their perspective comes from and having that conversation, they're now going to look at your perspective and be like, okay, the next deal I find, I know how you look at the numbers. I know what you're looking for. I have a better idea. Like, this isn't something that, hey, here's the first car you see when you go car shopping. You have to buy it. Like,
Right.
this is people. I know people who've spent 4 years looking for property until they bought the home they want to live in. It's not unrealistic to be a little patient with it. And at the end of the day, the beautiful part about this is it's not as emotional as a lot of other investments because look, if the numbers don't make sense to me and I'm full on board and I want to do it, what is an investor's reaction going to be if I don't believe in it, how I'm going to pitch it to them? And that no investors and no capital, no deal. I don't care how much you love it or I love it. It's not happening.
Yeah.
So just another question you mentioned about the hidden problems like the piping. How would I find out that information, or is that just something that risk?
It's a risk. So even when you pay your thousands of dollars for a property condition report, they're not going to bust open a wall to look at the pipes, right?
And there's no record of
They can only see what's on the surface. They can only notate the visible deficiencies. Now on sewer, you can do some sewer scopes on commercial properties that can add up a little quickly. Say you have a 20 building property, then you're gonna have to be checking 20 to 30 sewer connections, and a couple $100 a pop. So that is a little bit of a process, but that's where sometimes people say, you know what, we don't even want to deal with that potential headache, so let's do this different age of building. But then you might find a building that was built in the 50s, and maybe they did a gut renovation 10 years ago, and all the piping was already done to PVC and everything was replaced. And I have another property where we were looking at, and like almost everything was redone, new roofs, new piping. It was an early 70s property. And then finally when we go to tour the units, I was like, hey, what about the two elevators? Like how old is the elevators? And like, well, they've done all the repairs, like the certificates are up to date. And I was like, no. I want to know about the equipment, because replacing elevator equipment is 6 figures. So how's that look? And they're like, oh, we'll get back to you. And then the next time we did a tour with a different buyer, both of the elevators are getting replaced. And I was like, all right. So you guys realized that was holding you up.
So
Go
to
ahead.
that point too, it's like if we knew the answers to every like problem and property would have, our lives would be much easier. It's not going to be the case, but that's also why we're very big on under a conservative, like say like be very cautious in that sense. CapEx and reserves are going to be your biggest your best friends if anything like that does happen, because yeah, okay, yeah, are you if you check off every single thing that could go wrong, your reserves are going to be disgusting. But like, hey, realistically, and like you were saying, the age of the property is a big component. And then it really comes down to like how well of a track record are they keeping? Are they documenting stuff properly? Are they attending to stuff before they get out of hand? Especially anything involving water that can deteriorate or just like multi-level stuff, it just gets messy. And look, even then, you're gonna walk through every unit, which I can't believe it's the first time I'm saying this. Walk through every unit. I don't care what the how many unit. Kevin and I and other people on our team spent a full day and walked every single unit. It was hot. It was August. It was the actually I remember because it was the week of my birthday. It was August
Yeah.
like 21st. It was hot, and I'm an LA guy. I don't do Florida humidity. That doesn't work. I'm like, why is my sweat sweating? But whatever. Um, we did it. There's no way. Like, how can I look at an investor and say we've done our due diligence and not have walked every unit at the bare minimum?
Yeah. And on that, the only other thing I would say is like I would recommend too, like getting used to not physically touring a property that's not in your state until you have an LOI. Because you want to, before you're booking plane tickets and hotel rooms and the time investment, you want to at least know that your terms are within reach. And yes, like you make some assumptions on condition before that, but that at least you can get into a ballpark. And say, okay, so say we show up and the listing photos were maybe not doctored, but everything was done in the right angle to make everything look clean and nice. Um, and then you get there and
Good
you're like,
angle.
oh man, like there's a hole in that roof, and oh, what's over here? And there's junk dumped outside the property, and things like that. You'll at least have a better concept of again, like, hey, maybe we're closer to that 40-ish thousand per door versus the almost 100,000 that they're seeking. Because again, motivate to me as a motivation, retirement can be great, but it can also be one of those things where they're like, well, we're not going anywhere and we're making money on it. So if we get the right buyer, then yeah, we'll retire. That's not truly motivated. Our seller for the Panhandle did want to retire. He'd owned the property for 12 years. But we weren't sure of that motivation until we actually got under contract and met him during the tour, because started talking about how he just wanted to get some time back. He was building a house like an hour east of there and didn't want to self-manage something so far away. And like he kept kind of filling in all the holes for us as he was just chatting with us while we were waiting for some more of the partners to show up. And what really finally did it was he was like, I also bought like a 40 unit right by the house that I'm building, and that's going to be my pension. Like that's what I'm going to use for my retirement money. So this, like, this is my capital gain, like, help me cash out. And so once we heard that, we were like, all right, this guy's a partner, basically to help us get to the closing table, because he just wants to see light at the end of the tunnel.
And as much as everything is negotiated before, the negotiation doesn't stop once you get the LOI. Because let's be fair, it's impossible for you to know everything, an agent to know everything, and even the seller, depending how hands-on they are, to know
Yeah.
everything. And if you bring not issues, but like things that, hey, seller didn't know XYZ, it's gonna cost this much. Let's work on that. Like, can we meet somewhere? And like, yeah, you can ask for some credit back. Like, that's not like it's not something that you shouldn't do ever. I'm personally not a fan of people going into a contract and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna lock it up at 1 million, but I'm gonna go in and try to get 250 off because that meets my price." No, see that I don't agree with. What I do agree with though is, hey, I found this out. It'll cost about this much. Let's meet. Let's talk about it, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, everything in real estate is negotiable. But you have to have good reason, good intentions is the biggest part. And if the seller is willing to work with you, and you guys come to that agreement, and everyone wants to get the deal done, that's why you enter contract to begin with. Everyone's already spent time and money or lost time and money, so that makes that a lot easier. Now, is it always going to be a smooth process? I doubt it. But again, it's you have that authority to do that too.
Yeah, and like the term we use in the industry for that is retrading, right? Like you're going to retrade the price after you get it under contract. And even on our Panhandle, that was one of the concerns. He was like, look, like I'm giving you a great price. Like we got it So 1.25 million under two or 1.5 million under the list price. And you know, we were grateful for that, but he's like, look, I don't want any games. I don't want you to retrade me later. And like, no, sir, that's not our intention here. Like, we're trying to be as open and forthright with you as you are with us, hopefully. But then again, like we did one site tour, which was more of a kind of peeking around. And then we scheduled this full, you know, full inspection, you know, not just with the inspectors, but our inspection, where we went around with clipboards. Our teams broke apart. We each had units to look at. We had a list of things in every unit that we would take a picture of: the water heater sticker, the stove stickers, the air conditioner name plates that show the model numbers, because
The
manufacturers,
door
you
frames.
can determine when something is built based on the model number and little things like that. The door frames, the window frames, a couple things like that for all 120 apartments. All right. Big job, big compilation of data once we finished it. But we rushed, not rushed, we expediently went through all that. And then 72 hours later, I had the seller agreeing to credit $250,000 to us, because I came with an Excel sheet saying, hey, these are the air conditioners that are over 15 years old. These are the water heaters over 15 years old. These are the unit numbers. These are the units we found like some cracks and ceilings that we're a little bit nervous about. Maybe we're gonna have to do some plumbing fixes. Here's the cost of the parts. Here's the cost of the labor. Please agree. You know, and then yeah, there was like he asked us to eliminate the stuff on some of the door frames and stuff, but all the water heaters, the air conditioner, all the appliance stuff, we got credited at 100% of it.
And a lot of those units, when do you think is the last time they got into it? And it's been there 7 years and you've never stepped inside or needed to. Your
Yeah.
guess is as good as theirs. They're like, oh, we've never been in this unit. Cool.
Yeah, they've never called a
Come on
service call,
by.
so I guess it works all right. You know, like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
That's
So
that's a good one.
yeah, so it's that diligence that really helps you out. And again, you know, that helped us receive an extra $250,000 credit for our investors that we can then apply on top of our capex.
Hmm. Or reserves.
Yeah.
Differently, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I hope that helped. We're excited to get an update on how that looks and where that comes around. And one thing actually I would ask, going back to your initial question, is do your own underwriting, come up with a number you think you would have offered, see where else he's gotten offers at. For sure, they've gotten offers. There's no way you're on the market that long and no one's even thrown an offer, or at least spitballed. Hey, what are the rest of your offers? Just to see if you were close, right? Just out of curiosity, like, okay, they offered 3. Okay, I'm at this number. Did I get close to the other investors? That would make me feel better. Like, all right, cool, I did something right. If not, like, oh, what didn't I see, right? That's kind of how you fact check it, you know? And it's a fun way to, like, I like doing that. Like, hey, am I close? Am I far? Am I in between? What did it sell for? What can come from this, right?
Yeah.
And you never know. Like and it's not again always the highest price in this game, but if they're still not in contract, at least you have an idea.
Yeah, no, I just looked at the chat. So there's a couple questions I want to quickly answer, and I appreciate everybody for staying over with us. I don't want to drag it on too long, but I know Jennifer had asked a few questions. So Jennifer, on the LOI question, so after you do an LOI, what's the time frame you have for due diligence? That's completely customizable based upon your LOI. I can say that in South Florida, it still is a hot enough market to where a seller can tell me you get 15 days of due diligence, you close in 30 or get out. And I hate that, and I don't like dealing with those sellers. In my eyes, as a broker, the minimum due diligence I should be receiving on a commercial property should be somewhere between 45 and 60 days. And that's like on the lighter end of it. If it's a complex or larger property, I would try and get more, but be open and honest about why are you looking for that amount of time, and don't just create a large due diligence period to like drag out for you to do capital raising or you know, ancillary activities. You know, truly try and use that period for generating reports, getting your inspectors out there, getting.
Did we lose him?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we lost you for a sec.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so you wanna realize that the due diligence period is the period you are going to be finishing your underwrite. Like, you don't finish it before your LOIs are sent. The before is your hypothesis, and then during your due diligence, you're making it fact.
Because you don't have
And
a lot of
then,
the documents anyway.
right, you usually are not provided a majority of documents before you go under contract, and that, most sellers want that just for their own privacy before tax returns or other things are shared. And then you also asked about the standard percentage for CapEx and reserves. So CapEx is not a percentage. It should always be truly based on the projects that you think are going to need to happen. And that might mean, giving yourself an extra couple of days to create estimates. Did you lose me again there?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. And then in terms of the reserves, banks are usually going to look for a minimum of $250 or $500 per door for your initial operating reserve. I run under the assumption of a minimum of $1,000 per door. And that's like in the bank account at closing day. And then usually the minimum annual increase to the operating reserve account would be anywhere from $250 to $500 a door.
And of course, that is very deal specific.
Let's
Like
see.
if it's a new build, your reserve isn't going to have to be as aggressive. If it's something where high occupancy or high vacancy, parts of it are falling off, and like you're a little concerned with the condition, you want to have excess reserve because you don't know what other problems could be behind the scenes. You can take a wall down and the whole place collapse. You don't know. Like just sometimes you don't if you don't know, and it's I think area too. Like some areas obviously are gonna have wear and tear is gonna be more accelerated than other places. And of course, again, it goes down to insurance, location, knowing your market. Those are all factors as well. If everyone's underwriting X dollar or the typical norm is X, and you're like three times that, well, why first, and second, knowing why will help you with getting more accurate numbers. Because having it just to have it or far higher than everyone else, it may look weird on the numbers and affect some stuff too.
Yeah, 100%. And the scale of the amount of units you're buying affects that greatly. If you're getting a smaller complex, a high operating reserve will skew your returns more heavily. But at the end of the day, the way I look at it from a conservative standpoint is, if you're doing this as a syndication, that means whatever you need, if trouble comes up, you already need to have it in the bank. Because the last thing you want to do as an operator is to make a capital call. And especially if it's your first, second, or third deal, making a capital call will be your last deal. Because the reputation in this industry is everything. The operators that are doing things, it's a small circle. And the moment any operator goes into any distress or trouble, those rumors are flying on the private chats pretty quickly. So you want you can never overprotect yourself in that regard. And like, yeah, you might lose out on some opportunities that you didn't want to give yourself a higher risk profile on. But again, to me, fall back as the fiduciary, what I want. I don't know what I want my parents' money or my family, my brother's money, people I know's money to be at risk, and my money. No, I don't.
And
Like,
and
I want to feel comfortable about it. And so, yeah, sorry. So it's the $1,000 for me. It's the $1,000 minimum per door. But yeah, you got to look at the areas, and then check with your bank. The moment you're identifying who your lending partner is, ask them, what is the minimum, the underwriting requirement of the bank for the operating reserves? Because I mean, on our deal, it's a Freddie Mac loan assumption. Freddie Mac, they wanted $500 a door. And I said, that's great, we're doing 1,000, and of course that just makes them feel better.
Also, to add to that real quick, the number of buildings is underrated. Like that can be a factor. If it's all under one roof, it's a very different monster than if it's under 20 roofs, whatever. So you get my point. But just be aware of that as well, because not all of them age the same or maintain the same at the same situations, and be careful of trees above it, tree branches.
Yes.
One thing we learned is we're like, oh, tree branch, oh, falling is on a building is not a good idea. Be like, it's something small as that, right? So yeah, any other questions? Because I feel like we can go on forever, which I
Yeah.
love to do, but I need to hit the gym today. So any other questions? Anything else? Shoot, you guys have to wait 2 weeks for us. I'm sorry, but we'll be around. You guys can catch us in the chats, and in the WhatsApp and whatnot. But I appreciate it. Thank you guys. Kevin, any last words?
Thank you all. Yeah, my final words would be, again, thank you all for spending your Valentine's Day with us. That I appreciate that greatly. And for if you're not already involved with Multifamily Freedom Chasers, please jump in, join the community. We have a good program as well, the Fast Pass program that helps kind of give some coaching and mentorship towards different things. If you have any interest in that, you can ask about it in the WhatsApp group. Trevor and the other guys that lead MFC will be able to jump on and help you with that as well. But again, Ed and I are here. We're here to help. We're very passionate about these topics. That's why we can talk for 5 hours on spreadsheets. And again, it's exciting to know that we're able to help people provide clarity to themselves, to then hopefully accelerate their own futures and the legacies for their families. But again, thank you all so much for joining us, and we can't wait to do some more content with you in 2 weeks.
Good night, guys. Enjoy it.
Bye.
Thank you for the participation too. You guys are great.